Survivor specialists John and McKenna are back to talk about this episode 11 of season 47, but in the past. John, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It is technically Black Friday up here in Canada, but there was no Thanksgiving yesterday. But happy Thanksgiving to everyone who's listening.
Black Friday episode, let's go!
It's just a normal Friday up here, but very happy for all of you in America getting to celebrate the holidays. And I'm very happy to be talking Survivor, as always.
Yeah, all right. So let's get into our outwit moment of the week. And we are talking voting out someone for challenge prowess or strategic prowess, because that's kind of what we got here with Kyle versus Genevieve. Who do you take out first? And we're going to talk about one of the two bigger, well, not bigger, but like one really big moment with Cambodia of like, do we vote out Joe? Do we vote out Sierra? Do we, these are two people that you want to vote out for either challenge prowess or strategic prowess.
Yeah, and this week's episode is a little different than what we've been doing in the past because, in all honesty, we're not looking at particular moments this week that happened in 47 that really reflects moments in Survivor's past. It's more like we're getting to this point in the season, and it's very interesting that we're looking at more bigger picture ideas, right? Like, yes, we have this idea of voting out for challenge or strategy that's mentioned at Tribal Council and all that. And it's really been a theme of this last little while with Kyle winning and getting so close to winning that individual immunity record, that there is that threat of challenges. And of course, we have Andy going through the math of like, it's the 6.25% chance that he wins 4 in a row, which, again, as Phil, Will, and Blake explained on Wednesday, like probably being like very lenient with that because it's probably not a 50% chance that Kyle wins immunity every single time. But it's so interesting. It's been this age-old conversation in Survivor of like, what is more threatening, a strategic threat or a challenge threat? Is it some combination of both? What about social threats? Do they come into this picture at all? And it's interesting how we're really kind of seeing it manifest in 47, where we have people talking, we need to vote this person out. They're a threat. We have to vote out Kyle. He's a threat to win immunities, which means I can't win immunity. Or we have to vote out someone like Genevieve, who is a strategic threat, despite the fact that she has been completely declawed, defanged, and is sitting there with no one wanting to work with her at this point.
Yeah. So Kyle, I think, is very similar to Joe in gameplay, where he is just a loyal guy, sticks to the alliance that he's in and will ride with it. And, that's all Kyle wanted to do was stick to an alliance and ride with it. If he was winning the immunities, he was winning the immunities. He didn't have that other threat aspect to him to make it, oh, he's winning immunities and he's making moves. No, he's not making moves. So what's the harm in him winning immunity? I feel like Sue was the only person who really wanted him to go because he wrote her name down.
It's just, and yeah, and we saw that, right? We saw that conversation. Caroline mentioned that, like, it has to stay Kyle because I can't betray Sue this time around, right? So I think that was driving some of this, where Sue was so hell-bent on Kyle going home that it became the decision for the group, and it was the easier one because you need to you're trying to solidify a group of 5 here, right? So I think that's part of the decision here, but I think the justification people can give is, oh, but Kyle has a lot of like challenge threat potential, and there is actually a very large possibility he just wins all of these. It's not taking into consideration, as Will mentioned on Wednesday, the fact that as we get further into the merge, we're going to start losing those endurance-based individual immunity challenges. We're going to start moving into like obstacle course plus puzzle. And we haven't seen Kyle do a puzzle yet this season, so we don't know how strong he'd be at that, especially when you're going up against people like Rachel, who, again, this episode is just destroying a puzzle in a very dramatic fashion as production decided to go absolutely over the top with that puzzle. And it's just, I don't know. Sometimes when we get into this like mindset of we have to get rid of the challenge threat at this point in the merge, it feels like we are focusing on either an era of Survivor that's long gone, or we're just not utilizing our best Survivor knowledge to understand that who is a challenge threat changes throughout the merge.
Exactly. And I think Genevieve is definitely the right person to go here because she has been proven for 2 votes now to make moves, to make call the shots, to get her name off of the block to make it Gabe, right? She pivoted because it was gonna be her, and then she pivoted and rallied votes for herself to stay. So someone like Sierra in Second Chances, while she didn't go very far, she was creating the term voting blocks. Like she was using that strategy of we don't have to be aligned for forever. We can be aligned for right now, and let's make this move. Let's do this thing that benefits us all. So
Well,
Genevieve, while you said she was declawed, has the ability to, regain some of that momentum with just the right thing to happen. She can use some sort of strategic move here to try and get herself off of the bottom, and it could work.
yeah, it's such a hard argument because even like going back to Cambodia, looking at this situation that we've like kind of presented here, right? We have someone like Sierra Easton who is a strategic force. Like we've seen she has that cutthroat nature to her as she voted off her mom in Blood versus Water, and we understand that she's willing to make moves. Yes, she's in this minority alliance, but as we could see, like the game was a little more fluid. It was quite similar to what we see in the new era, right? Where the game is more fluid. We have more of these voting blocks rather than big alliances. And because of that, someone who is coming up with the terminology for it, someone who is taking advantage of it is a very scary threat. And I think that is really that analog to Genevieve that we're seeing, right? Where it's like, yes, Genevieve is out. She's on the bottom. There is a group of 5 forming that is against a group of 3. And is Genevieve the most threatening out of that group right now? It's a hard thing to say because, like, if you think a strategic threat is more threatening or a physical threat is more threatening, you should like the video and subscribe to the channel, no matter what. But in the end, right, like it's all dependent on who you think is more threatening to your own game. He is someone like, I mean, some of these people have beaten Kyle at an immunity challenge, right? Teeny and Genevieve beat him at an immunity challenge. They just happened to not get a necklace out of it. So it's interesting when you get these strategic threats, because I think strategic threats are less threatening at getting to the end, but are more threatening at the end. And I think that's the biggest thing when it comes to threat assessment is who are the people in the game going to vote for at the end of the game? And that's what Phil has been talking about nonstop for the last couple of weeks when it comes to Kyle. Can Kyle get to the end and win? We saw conversations in this episode about, oh, well, he has his story and everything like that. Is a story enough to get you the win in Survivor? Historically, it hasn't been.
It just aids, like, it's not a bad thing to have. So, like, Jeremy with the babies, Adam with his mom, like, it adds to it, but it's never, like, the crux of their winnings. It's always, oh, you have this strategy and a cause.
Yeah, like, it feels like those things that, like, in the moment feel threatening, but when you actually get to the end, it's not as threatening. And I guess really what this conversation comes down to is threat evaluation, right? And this idea that like this strategic threat, someone like Sierra, who is maneuvering and making relationships, utilizing her social capital in Cambodia to kind of change the dynamic of Survivor at that point, right? Because it is just a very different way of approaching Survivor, what we see in Cambodia, that has become more of a norm since then.
And I think Jeremy did it the correct way in voting out Sierra before she really got legs, before her maneuvering and perfecting of voting blocks worked out, and then he got out Joe when he needed to, or when he was able to, he got out Joe. So like there was no, I think Jeremy did it in the proper way, and I think we should have seen Genevieve go here tonight, because who knows what she can be up to in these next few episodes to come.
I think the bigger concern when it comes to this evaluation, and like we'll talk about Joe a little bit more in a second here, but when you're thinking about a strategic threat versus a physical threat, I think it's not so much what can that player do, it's what can other players do with that player. And I think that that's part of the complicated nature of Survivor is you're not playing one-on-one. You're not playing against someone. McKenna, if we're on a tribe, it's not you and I, and one of us gets to the end and wins the game, and one of us doesn't. There are 4 to 8 to 12 other people. Wow, that would be a very large Survivor tribe, but we've seen it before. And that we have to compete against, right? And whatever beef we have with each other is going to be utilized by those people around us. And that's what I think is so scary about the strategic threats, is they are the type of people who are willing to make those moves. They're the ones who are willing not just to like betray their allies and everything like that, but they're willing to keep themselves alive and do what it has to take, right? This is someone like Sandra, who I know we like credit her more as like this big social player and everything, but her anyone but me strategy is like one of the biggest strategies that these strategic players I think are compared to a lot. Because
I mean, did we have that Genevieve moment of I'm disassociating from everything so I can be this villain for a reason? Like, yeah, probably.
Yeah, probably, right? And like that's the thing. It's like it is this idea of like anyone but me. And that I think is what scares people about strategic players. Whereas if we look at the physical players and like our challenge piece, like our Joe Lincolns, right? Or our Aussies, or Jonathan Young, if we're going for a more new era approach, we're seeing people who tend to be more loyal to their original relationships, right? So maybe the threat of a challenge threat is lessened by the fact that they tend to be loyal to people. So they're a larger threat if you're opposed to them, but if you're working with them, they're less of a threat because it isn't going to be as easy to pull them over. Maybe the fear is that a challenge threat someday becomes a strategic threat.
One day.
It's out there. It's out there. I think it's just so interesting when we look at Joe. Because I think Joe is like a really good example of this, because Aussie, more difficult. Aussie makes it to the end in 2 of the seasons that he played. Granted, he is voted out in one of them and comes back, but like
that's the season he
still makes it to the end. Right? Almost makes it to the end in South Pacific. And in Micronesia, he just happens to be not in this woman's alliance. So he's gone. He isn't voted out for his challenge prowess in that one. And then in Game Changers, I mean, it's Aussie in Game Changers. It's nothing too exciting. But when we look at Joe, right, like Joe amasses these wins early on in the merge and then gets voted out. Yes, he makes it through 1 vote in Cambodia without a necklace, but like Steven's literally pushing, we have to vote Joe out the entire game. And then when we get to Edge of Extinction, his vote out in Edge of Extinction is, he's been on the bottom of the commas the entire game. He's been on the outside, but he loses immunity, and Ron's immediate response is, we got an opportunity. We got to take him out now. It might be our only chance. And it's the merge. There are 13 people left in the game at that point.
If you want to hear us talk more about this Joe boot, please do become a patron, because we will be talking about that tomorrow, episode 6 of Edge of Extinction.
It's a good time to become a patron because 50% off for the first month.
Whoa! Are we ready to go into outplay, John, or do you have more on this strategic versus
what are you
physical?
More threatened by?
I'm more threatened by strategic, because if that physical person is in my alliance, or I can make them be in my alliance, it doesn't matter. Then I can use their vote for whatever. The strategic is the ones that can make moves and make wine out of water.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's quite a claim. But I think like there are other things too, right? When we get to there's something nice in the consistency of the same person winning immunity over and over again too.
Yeah, true.
Makes it harder for other people to win immunity.
Mm-hmm.
And so like that makes sense. Honestly, strategic threats, you're going to run into all of them. Everyone playing Survivor is a strategic threat in some sense. Some people are physical threats, so you have to take them into consideration. I'm more scared of social threats. They're terrifying. They're the ones who win the game.
Well, that's not what's on the docket today. It's strategic versus challenge. So
I'm probably taking out a strategic threat over a challenge. Someone who could probably compete decently in challenges. So we'll see.
So our outplay portion is where we talk about the challenges. So I just want to highlight this comment before we really get into our moment. It's very off topic, but outside of the new era, does Jeff say, now you guys look like Survivor players? Because whenever he says that, I feel less about the players on screen.
I know he said it before. I can't remember how many times he said it before the new era. I'm pretty sure the phrase has been used before the new era. But I do kind of agree with Louise here that it does kind of make them seem more like characters on a show rather than people competing in Survivor.
Like we weren't Survivor players last week when our faces were in the sand,
Yeah, or when we got
Survivor players when we blindsided people. We weren't Survivor players when we were doing this thing beforehand. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just weird. It's a weird statement. I agree, Louise. It's a weird one.
All right. So our outplay is a bit tipsy. It is the immunity challenge in this episode where you stack the blocks to spell immunity and wobbly table, the whole 9 yards. But John is here to talk to you about a pre-merge version of the challenge.
Yeah. So a bit tipsy is interesting, and there was a very good conversation between the guys on the recap this week, where Blake commented that Jeff's commentary in this week's episode was very kind of blasé, right? Like it was like just like the same old. Like Jeff's done this so many times. There's only so many ways you can commentate this. But Phil and Will kind of both landed on the side of, yeah, but this is a really interesting immunity challenge to watch. And I also landed on that side. I love this immunity challenge. I think it has, because it has those changes in leads so frequently, and because it visually you can see it, you get the wide shot and you know exactly how far along everyone is. Yes, we have the Jeff's commentary, which like take it or leave it, whatever it is, like he's commentating people putting blocks on a thing. You can only do so much. But I think this is one of the more exciting immunity challenges. I love it whenever it comes up. And it did start as an individual challenge. We've seen the evolution of this challenge over the years, right? Like it started off with them doing it and not having to put them on top of each other. They had to go beside each other instead. And then we get it into the one where they're building on top. But we did see it as a tribal immunity challenge in 2 seasons, in Heroes, Healers, Hustlers, and Ghost Island. And I think HHH proved exactly why we have not seen it as a tribal immunity since that cycle. Because boy, oh boy, do they break this challenge.
Oh, yeah. There is a bit of a learning curve, for sure. But I like this if they didn't have that anchor point. I think that anchor point is what kind of breaks the challenge.
Yeah, I mean, really what it comes down to is, and for those who haven't seen HHH in a while, what happens is the tribes are doing this in tribes, and they have to, there's like 5 points that they're walking out from one at a time to put the letters up, and they have to hold it. And we see them really struggling with when they're getting closer. Like Ryan gets really close, and he he lifts it up too much, so it ends up falling over, or they lift it down, or they put it down too low, they put too much slack on it. But then we see the red tribe get to the point where they've fallen out of it and they have to catch up. So what they realize they can do is just put a ton of tension on the ropes of the people not walking it in, and the person who's walking it in can literally just hold the rope at the end, put all the slack on it, and place the letter. And it has them fly through this challenge.
Yeah, they have kind of like a come from behind victory here. And while everybody is inching back, they just keep walking and walking and walking. I also watched the Ghost Island one, and some people are kind of learning how to utilize this strategy, and then other teams aren't, and it's just yelling at everybody for tension, so it is a good challenge, but I feel like it just doesn't have that suspense as not last night's 2 nights ago.
I agree. I think a lot of it comes to the fact that
individually it has a better oh
it's
my god,
better when there are more than 3 that are going. Yes,
Mhm.
the interesting thing about it in the tribal phase is that we do get that communication between the tribes, and we do get like the frustration. I think this is a challenge that is designed in a way to breed frustration. But again, like, because this is the same cycle, right? Like HHH and Ghost Island were filmed back to back. So I think once HHH aired and you saw, oh, we could just hold the tension and the one person can walk it, you're just like, we can't really use this challenge anymore because anyone who has seen this will know exactly what to do.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
and then you bring it back to its original format, and it's still very entertaining. And that one, you can't cheat because someone's always holding it.
Yeah. Then I'm gonna go with a little like altered version of this challenge once again, and we're gonna just talk more Edge of Extinction. And that is the final immunity challenge in Edge. They have a little bit of bigger blocks. They're more square instead of less like flat rectangular, and they have to spell final 3. But except they're on this like rocking horse boat situation, so their platform is unsteady as well as the like flipping platform that they're stacking the blocks on. So it's just a double layer of tippy. And this also I feel did not have as much drama because there's only 4 of them going here, and Chris just had an overwhelming lead where the people behind him kept falling. Instead of those people that are in the lead keep falling, it was other people behind him. So Gavin was his next closest person. He falls. Julie was the next closest. She falls. So that just like created Chris's lead as bigger and bigger, and nobody was really able to catch up to him, where Kyle almost caught up to Rachel in his like last run.
How exciting was that too? Like, Kyle was very close to still winning this challenge.
Yeah.
Which is probably why he had that challenge threat still going into this, where it's like, okay, but Kyle almost won this one too. I think the big difference and why there is more excitement in this version rather than the other one is the distance they have to travel with these letters.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because like in the Edge of Extinction finale, it's a shorter distance. And I think that does benefit someone of Chris's size, right? He can take steps and he doesn't have to take as many. And yes, technically that's true of the iteration we saw last night as well. But because of how far you're going,
it kind of balances out.
Yeah, exactly. And like it's sand, it's uneven. You have to be very careful with your foot placement, and you're also being careful. Like if you, I don't know, step the wrong way, you can still pull that rope or drop that rope, and it's going to drop your table, and you have to start again.
Yeah. I think it also, this challenge benefits from more people, not more more people competing, because not more bodies like in HHH. There were many people like doing the challenge, but it was just so much better individually.
Yeah,
As
I
an
agree.
individual challenge.
I think it's just a fun challenge to watch. I think complain about challenges not being great for viewers a lot of the time,
Mhm.
this entire episode of 47 had challenges that were great for viewers. Even Rachel's puzzle, which like we didn't get to see exactly how she was doing it, but we saw enough of it and it was fun to follow along. But the visualization of those weights going into the ocean, it just
Really,
looked
yeah.
fantastic. And
Exactly.
it's nice to see production thinking about that. The visual media that is being used, and not just the
Mhm.
players that are playing the game.
Mhm. Agreed. All right, so our last topic of the episode is outlast, and that's being in the majority versus creating pluralities. And we've been seeing in the new era a lot of we need to be in the majority, need to be in the majority, need to be in the majority votes, rather than people carving their own path and saying, we don't need to be in the majority, we just need the majority of votes.
It's a very interesting thing. It's kind of like this evolution of the vote in the merge portion of the game. I mean, when we look at the early sections of the game, right, we have pagongings a lot of the time, right? Like, I mean, obviously in Borneo, we have a pagonging that isn't brought on by a vast majority at the merge because they merge with equal numbers, but it is brought on by the like weird plurality vote that happens at the merge, and then you know Doggy just figuring out how to vote together. And like that's fine. And then as we progress through those early seasons of Survivor, and we do get a little more fluidity in the votes and everything like that, we do tend to see two opposing alliances going at each other until one's decimated, and then of course we have the ones that like kind of go back and forth, and we have
Mhm.
that evolution as well. In the new era, we've moved more towards these votes where everyone votes for the person that's going home, except
Mhm.
for like the one person needed to counteract that person's vote to in case they have an idol or they play a shot in the dark. And obviously, if shot in the dark
Yeah.
wasn't an option last night for
Or
Kyle,
maybe if they have, like, one ally or something
yeah,
that's in the dark, yeah.
right. And it's just like we're not seeing split votes anymore. We're not seeing budding alliances going after each other. And part of that's just I think part of that comes from the three tribe format.
Mhm.
And like you literally have to work with other people in order to have a majority in this format. But because of that, we see a lot of people, I think, playing it safe in these votes now, where they are putting the votes with the majority so they're not on the wrong side. We've seen it several times in 47 already, right?
Mhm.
Caroline mentions it today. Like, I have to vote Kyle because of Sue. We see, um, even if we go back to like the Saul vote, where Teeny votes for Saul, right?
Mhm.
Because she has to, because it'll put her on the wrong side. It's so interesting and fascinating seeing the way that these new era Survivor votes are kind of becoming similar to Big Brother house votes, where you're not voting up in the opposition of the majority so you're not painting a target on yourself instead, right?
Mhm.
It's fascinating to see Survivor moving in this route.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about Teeny voting for Saul because they didn't wanna be left out, and that is we've already talked about Sierra. Let's talk about her again. Sierra voting out her mom. She didn't have to vote out her mom. Her vote was not needed, but she didn't wanna be in the minority. She wanted to show Tyson, I'm gonna vote with you if that means voting out my mom. And she voted in the majority when it wasn't needed because she didn't want that target, even though people were saying it's okay, you don't have to. She still put her mom's name down.
I think it's very similar to that situation in Blood versus Water, because when we're looking at the way that Sierra has to vote out Laura there's no world where that was a necessary vote, right? But what Sierra is doing is she's writing her mom's name down instead of someone else's name because she doesn't want that falling back on her. She doesn't want she's literally thinking about the one person she would have to write the name down of who
Mhm.
might come after her there and reel the numbers around her. But literally no one on that beach would blame her for not writing her mom's name down.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
kind of the extreme case of this situation.
Mhm. And then we have, like talked about people carving their paths, right? And that is Suri. We're never going to get another Suri again. But Suri, her first season out, when we didn't know what kind of name she was going to become, when she makes the 3-2-1, when she's involved in the Bob Dog plurality, like these are she's carving her way and making votes that make sense for her.
Yeah, I mean, plurality is one of those big things where, and that's what we're kind of missing in New Age Survivor. And yeah, I get it. Like, we're not going to see 3-2-1s every season. It's a very difficult thing to pull off. You have to
Yeah.
convince someone to vote a different way. But we have seen pluralities a few times. Like, we see them in Edge of Extinction. We almost get one in David versus Goliath. Like, there are different instances where we do get some pluralities floating around, but they're hard to pull off because you need different groups thinking different things, but we don't even see opposition anymore. That's the baffling thing about it. Like with these pluralities, yes, like the 3-2-1's kind of make. No, the 3-2-1's actually a really good example because there are two people who are very convinced they are voting a single way. They're doing that in order to, get their way. And they don't care where the majority is going. I mean, obviously they think they're in the majority, which is part of like the tricky thing with a plurality. But they're also not like, I'm scared if I'm not in the plurality, right? Like there just seemed to be a more weight, and it's really funny that in the new era when we're dealing with lost votes so much, there seems to be more weight in voting together with people rather than utilizing your vote as the power that a vote is. In my opinion, the vote is, and we had that conversation during the Rice negotiation. The vote is the most powerful thing you have in the game.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why people are so mad when we see people losing their votes in the new era. But we don't even see people leveraging their votes in the new era either.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like if anybody's going to be able to do something this season, it's going to be, Genevieve with really, I mean, we saw it with the Gabe vote a bit, but it was still Genevieve or Gabe. There was no other path where, I thought some other things could happen. I thought Sam might do something after Rachel tells him plans about Saul, and they might go Rachel because they don't need the majority of votes if everybody thinks X, Y, and Z is going on. But we saw the majority dump on Saul. So there are opportunities that have definitely arisen this season where people could have carved out, this is something I can do, this is something I can do, and we just haven't seen it. We've gotten that, majority mindset.
Yeah, it just feels like we're in an era where there's not like direct opposition. And again, I do think part of it does have to do with the 3-tribe structure, but it's not even like we're getting 2 tribes versus 1 tribe. We kind of did with the Sierra vote, I suppose. But like Andy voting in the majority really didn't change that. Yes, that was the biggest like outlier in these examples, but since then it's just been pile on, and we saw that all last season. We saw it all in 45. It's just so often we're getting these pile ons, and I really hope. I don't have hope for 48 because they're not listening to us now. But anyone who goes out for 49 and 50, hopefully with like returning seasons, we don't see
if
that.
anybody from 50 is listening.
But like people who go out for 49, just like use your vote more for power. And like it's not just me talking as a Survivor fan who likes to see some action and some variance in the game and anything like that. I'm not asking just as a viewer perspective.
Playing Survivor, yeah.
I'm not just asking from the viewer perspective. I'm just saying, like, from a strategic perspective, use your vote. Like, yes, it can be scary to oppose the majority, but maybe sometimes that opposition to the majority is what breaks the majority. And I think we've seen that in Survivor's past. When we do have those smaller alliances going up against those bigger alliances, again, like bringing it back to Edge of Extinction again, right? Like the Lessus versus the Commons, right? Use your votes.
Yep.
And it breaks them down because eventually, like these majorities, even with this 5, right? This 5, we saw them talking. We saw, was it Sam who mentioned it? I think it was actually the 3 who was talking about like one of us can flip to vote the other two out, but then we're sitting ducks at 6. I don't even think that's the case because this 5 has to break up at some point, right?
Yeah.
Like you have to show them your willingness to go against people, just so that maybe some people are also willing to go against people. They just don't want to be the first person to do it. What did they say? Like the first person isn't a trendsetter, the second person is. Like the second person to do something is.
Sure.
So be the first person so someone can be the second person.
Yeah. Well, please, everyone, do go watch Edge of Extinction episode 6. There is that plurality vote. There's the Joe versus Kelly of challenge versus strategic debate. We've got a lot of ties in, surprisingly, with the merge episode. So go watch that for tomorrow. And John, what do we have going on the rest of this week? And
well, I already mentioned it. Blake was dragged on to the recap this week because Rachel had a very good episode, and Blake, said there was no chance she was winning the game. So had to go show that. Phil made sure Blake was there to discuss that with him and Will. Tomorrow, Phil is going to be doing Digging Deeper with Tigwis. So that'll definitely be worth tuning in. Make sure you do that. Then at some point this weekend, either on Sunday or Monday, Phil will be doing the predictions of power rankings. If it's Sunday, it's with Will. If it's Monday, it's with James Jones. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you know when that's happening. And you can get that on. And then Phil and I are doing our top 10 Christmas movies released after 1990 on Monday. It'll be an interesting one. I know that because I've made one of the lists now, and it is in fact an interesting list. And I am prepared for all of you to get mad at me for some of my exclusions. I'm sure it'll happen. And then, of course, Phil and Will back at you after next week's episode. And McKenna and I will be here to rewind it afterwards. Over on the Patreon, Every Season Matters, still going through Panama. We have our $5 Tuesdays for those who love movies. We've just finished going through the Ridley Scott movies. Now we're transitioning into Christmas movies because that's what our top 10 is this week. We got the Survivor Rock Draw, Every Season Matters, more Every Season Matters, and then Phil's after show, Phil's Australian Survivor Watch, and us on the Survivor Rewind, where we are rewinding the Edge of Extinction this week.
Alrighty, everyone. We will see you next Friday or tomorrow, depending on what you want to do. All right, goodbye.